Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're going to pull back the curtain on something that underpins America's global power, something that a lot of people argue is way more influential than even its military.
So, when I say American power, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Is it, those massive aircraft carriers? Maybe cutting-edge tech? Or, of course, the big one, nuclear weapons? And yeah, those are all huge symbols of strength, for sure, but they are not the whole story, not by a long shot. The real answer? Well, it might just surprise you. Hint, it's not a weapon you can see. It's a financial system, a really complex arrangement called the petrodollar system. And trust me, getting your head around this is key to understanding how modern global economics and power really work.
All right, so let's get right into it. What exactly is the petrodollar? The name itself gives you a pretty big clue, right? Petro for oil and dollar for, well, the US dollar. But what does that actually mean in the real world?
So here's the deal. The petrodollar isn't some special kind of money. It's a system. It's basically a rule, an agreement that says if you want to buy or sell oil on the big global market, you've got to use US dollars. I mean, just think about that for a second. Any country that needs oil, and let's be real, that's pretty much every country, has this constant built-in demand for American currency.
But wait, it gets even more interesting. It's not just about buying oil. There's this second crucial part called petrodollar recycling. So after a country like Saudi Arabia sells its oil and gets all those US dollars, they don't just, stuff them under a mattress. They take that money and invest it right back into the United States, usually by buying things like US government bonds. It creates this amazing, kind of perfect cycle where the world's oil money flows straight back into the US economy.
And this quote really just nails it. Think about it. Most governments have to go out and convince people to lend them money. But for the US, because of this system, the loans kind of just flow in automatically. Every single time oil is sold anywhere in the world, it creates this demand for dollars. And then those dollars get recycled right back to the US. It's like having a permanent, super low-cost line of credit, all funded by the world's need for oil.
So you got to be asking, how did a system this powerful, this beneficial for the US even come to be? Well, it wasn't an accident. Nope, it was born out of a moment of major global crisis.
Okay, a quick history lesson. After World War II, you had the Bretton Woods system, where the US dollar was linked to gold and everyone else was linked to the dollar. But then, boom, 1971. President Nixon takes the US off the gold standard. It was called the Nixon shock. Then, just 2 years later, a huge oil crisis hits the globe. Suddenly, the US needed a new way to keep the dollar at the center of the world's economy.
And the solution? It was a quiet, kind of secret deal made in 1974 between the US and Saudi Arabia. The trade-off was pretty simple, really. The US said, we'll give you military protection and access to our best technology, and in return, Saudi Arabia promised to do two things: sell their oil only in US dollars, and then take those profits and invest them back in US bonds. And once Saudi Arabia was on board, pretty much every other major oil producer followed.
So, this deal gave the US an absolutely incredible amount of economic power. But it's really a double-edged sword. It's got some major controversies and costs, including a really surprising one for the US itself.
Okay, so this is why we call it a weapon. It gives the US three huge advantages. First, all that global demand for dollars keeps the currencies super strong. Second, like we talked about, it means a steady stream of cheap loans flowing into the country. And third, and this is a big one, it's a massive tool for sanctions. Since almost everything runs on dollars, the US can basically flip a switch and lock a country out of the global financial system. That is serious power.
But, of course, there's a flip side. The system makes everyone else really dependent on the US. Their economies can get rocked by American policy, and the oil nations, their entire wealth is tied to how well the US economy is doing. But here's the really wild part: the cost for the US itself. To make this whole thing work, America has to run a trade deficit. It has to buy more stuff from the world than it sells. Why? To make sure there are enough dollars floating around out there for other countries to use to buy oil. It's a built-in requirement of the system, and it has real consequences, like making it tougher for US manufacturing.
So at the end of the day, it's all about this trade-off. On one side, you've got incredible global power. Everyone needs your currency. You get cheap debt, and you can sanction anyone. But on the other side, you've got the price tag, a mandatory trade deficit, and being tangled up in everyone else's economic business. And for the last 50 years, the US has basically said, yep, that power is worth the price.
But here's the billion-dollar question, or maybe trillion-dollar question. Can this system actually last forever?
Because right now, for the first time in a long time, the petrodollar is facing some really serious challenges. Let's take a look at what's starting to shake things up.
You can really break down the threats into three big categories. First, you've got major geopolitical shifts. Think rising powers like the BRICS nations. Second, other currencies are starting to pop up as real alternatives for trading oil. And third, there's the big one, the global shift to green, renewable energy. If the world runs on less oil, what happens to the system built on it?
So you have countries like China, Russia, and India, that BRICS group, who are actively looking for ways to trade with each other without using the dollar. People are even talking about a petroyuan, right? China and Saudi Arabia have had discussions about pricing oil in the Chinese currency. And on top of all that, you have the move toward green energy. I mean, if oil isn't the king of the global economy anymore, what does that mean for the currency that's tied to it? It's a huge question.
Okay, so it's really important to add a little perspective here. Even without the petrodollar system, the US dollar is just so deeply baked into the entire global economy. It's used for everything. So losing the system, yeah, it would be a major blow to American power, for sure. But would it be a fatal one? Probably not.
And that leaves us with the final, massive question. In this new world of shifting power and new kinds of energy, is the nearly 50-year reign of the petrodollar coming to an end? The future of global power? Well, it might just depend on whatever comes next.